As we are coming to the end of the third day, I am quite honored to have here on our panel today Nancy Luquette, who is the Chief Risk Officer of S&P Global. And S&P Global, as you know, is one of the premier institutions in the world from a risk intelligence and intelligence perspective, market research, and ratings. Nancy, I welcome to the summit, to the GRC summit, and look forward to your insights here.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Gaurav, and happy to be here.
Yeah, Nancy, let me just introduce you briefly. So for the audience here, Nancy serves as the Chief Risk Officer and the Executive Vice President for S&P Global. And she's responsible for the company's entire risk management program, including corporate and division compliance and information security functions as well. And additionally, as if this is not enough, Nancy also provides oversight for the global internal audit function, has been with S&P for a long time in various first, second, third line of defense functions. And prior to that, Nancy was also the Vice President and General Auditor for Avaya, and also a partner in PwC's internal audit and global risk practice. And the final thing I'd say about Nancy before we ask her some of the deep insights with the privileged position she is in, is that not surprisingly, Nancy's hobbies also lend themselves very well to the whole integration of first, second, third line of defense. She's a tandem bicycler, very often working together with a family and going on trips with a family on tandem cycling, and also a musician getting together, and orchestrating risk management, at S&P and at other places as well. So Nancy, welcome once again, and very glad to have you here.
Great, thank you, Gaurav.
So Nancy, we'll kick it off, with a couple of questions. There's obviously the current risk scenario is on top of mind for a lot of people in the audience and otherwise as well, with cyber risks having gone up significantly, infectious diseases. We are sitting in California and you're in New York, where the COVID again has reared its head up. We're getting into a lockdown, in several places across the world again. And this clearly, a lot of companies are looking at new strategies, with a focus on improving or increasing risk visibility and impact on the organizations there. So let me start with your personal experience over the last year and more. You took on the role of Chief Risk Officer at a time when risk has really taken a sharp turn in different directions. In Jan 2020, you took on this role. As a leader in risk analysis and risk management frameworks, can you share a little bit about how and what S&P has done and how they've adjusted to this new scenario internally?
Sure, yes, thank you for the question. And you're absolutely right, Gaurav. It was an interesting time for me to take on this role at the beginning of 2020. Little did I know that we would just shortly thereafter be entering into such an interesting year of 2020 with the COVID-19 pandemic, sending everybody working remotely from home. And for us, that's about 23,000 people. I know there are other organizations that have many more people than that, but it meant that we had to think about risk a lot differently just because of our complete remote workforce. So we actually did about three different things in terms of how we decided to approach risk coming into this interesting year. So the first thing that we did was we took a fresh look at our top enterprise risk profile. And we do that exercise very formally every year, and it's based on our risk appetite, our risk tolerances. But we knew now going into this pandemic that we needed to take a fresh look at all of our top risks. And about half of them actually we determined had an impact as a result of the pandemic. So we needed to make sure that we took appropriate actions, making sure that anything that we were doing was still within our risk tolerance levels. And in some cases, we had to adjust our risk tolerance and our risk appetite a bit, particularly because we were sending everyone to work remotely. And so we had to grant some risk acceptances for a period of time in order to get everybody working 100% from their homes. So that was the first thing that we did. The second thing that we did was we also enhanced our emerging risk process. We had been building our emerging risk profile for the past 2 to 3 years, but this was something that we really also wanted to take a fresh look at. We got information from the outside, so we reached out to organizations such as the World Economic Forum. We got input from Gartner, a lot of other resources to take a look at what are some emerging risks that we should be thinking about. And we created what we call our emerging risk radar. And we plotted each of those emerging risks on this radar. And the ones that were getting closer to the center, we knew we needed to be more proactive and take action rather than waiting for the event to occur. We pulled our enterprise risk management committee together and we talked about those and decided some different actions to take around emerging risks. And interestingly enough, having a global pandemic was not something that we had on our emerging risk radar. We did look at things like global issues, things that might happen in a particular part of the globe, but we never envisioned that there would be something that could impact us worldwide. So that was something that we took a fresh look at. And then I guess the third thing that we did was we reached out to each of our division leaders, and we have risk individuals implanted in each of our divisions, and we really connected with them to see how they were doing around business continuity. We have business continuity plans, but it was important to understand that they had them established, that they were going to be able to work with them effectively. And we got connected to the risk committees in each of our divisions and made sure that we really had a good dialogue going for them to be able to deal with some of these risks on a real-time basis. So those were some of the key things that we did, kind of coming into the beginning of the pandemic and then kind of working through these past 10 and a half months or so of dealing with the global pandemic.
Part of my next question that I was asking you because of what you've done at S&P, but a lot of companies have thought about credit risk, and they've typically thought about credit risk. Like in one of our earlier panels, Eileen from Fitch Ratings, the chief risk officer, she was mentioning that a lot of their focus was on credit risk, and then had to convert to operational resilience. Any other? You actually have a pretty deep background across functions, whether it's vendor risk or BCM or information security. Any other thing you'd like to add on what companies can do from an operational resilience perspective, during times like these or even beyond?
Yeah, it's a great question, Gaurav, and you're right. I mean, I do have an interesting portfolio under my responsibility, having the risk management team, which is comprised of vendor risk, enterprise risk, and technology risk, and then I also have the information security team and compliance. We call that global risk assurance, and so we get together regularly and talk about some of the risks that each of us are seeing from our respective functional views, and try to make sure that we're working with the business, working with the company to address those areas as best as possible. So one of the things that we really decided to enhance, in addition to our business continuity planning, we needed to make sure that those were being appropriately tested. We knew we were actually living those business continuity plans now, so it's important to make sure that you learn from those. We took the time to meet with each of our divisions to find out what's working, what's not working, how do we modify those business continuity plans. And we also learned that some areas that businesses felt were mission critical didn't really need to be considered mission critical. And when you're kind of living through that experience, you learn those lessons on a real-time basis. So really being able to enhance and learn from the experience how to improve upon those business continuity plans. But the second thing that I would say that's important for organizations to do to drive operational resilience, and it's something that we've been doing for the past few years, is something that we call scenario planning. And we try to take a look at either white swan events, black swan events, and make sure that we can do a lot of those what if scenario discussions. We pull workshops together and get people from all across the organization to talk about those. I will tell you that prior to the COVID pandemic, it was challenging for us to convince the business that we needed to do these scenario plans. But it's interesting what a pandemic will do when something like this occurs. We've actually gotten the attention of the business leaders now, and we're regularly doing these scenario workshops. And it's interesting, you can do those virtually. You don't have to have everyone together in one room. We're pulling people in from the business, from finance, from the different functional areas, the people team, our HR group, and talking about these various different scenarios, and being able to take action coming out of those that says, if this were to occur, what's the likelihood? What could be the potential impact? And then taking some actions coming out of those scenario plans. So I think that's another thing that I would encourage organizations to do to help to drive that operational resilience.
Thanks, Nancy. And related to that, I'm hearing from a lot of our other peer organizations in terms of how boards have become more involved, especially in the last 8-9 months, in terms of both governance, but also trying to help, looking at various spectrums of the companies that they serve on the board of, right? So how do you, as a chief risk officer, how do you support the board? How has that changed in terms of key risk management strategies, for to look out for possibly other events or risks that might, be more risky, if you will?
Sure. Now, it's a great question, Gaurav, and many of the things that I've talked about already are things that the board is showing a lot of interest in. The emerging risk radar that I mentioned is something that our audit committee took a lot of interest in, and I just recently shared that with them. And it was something that they found quite interesting and have asked that we as an enterprise risk management committee continue to focus on that radar and keep them apprised as we see risks, getting closer and closer to the center, and informing them of the actions that we're taking. We've also, the scenario planning that I just talked about is something that we share the output with our financial planning committee of the board, and they're quite interested in the outcome from that. But I would say the other thing that they have found of interest is we do tabletop exercises. So we, would play a cyber event or a ransomware event, and that's something that we've done recently, and providing that output to the board in terms of what lessons did we learn, what would we do differently, and for us, coming out of the ransomware event, we determined that we needed to establish a separate document that talked about what actions will we take in the event of a ransomware attack. Prior to ransomware being so kind of at the forefront, we really hadn't looked at that separately, and we just had it built in as a part of our regular incident response plan. But we felt it was important, based on that exercise that we did, that we had a separate plan for that. And then I guess the final thing that we're doing with the board, we're working to integrate risk management into all of our strategic planning with our divisions. So the idea is to have risk be built into what people are doing. And one of the phrases that I've been using since becoming the chief risk officer is enabling our business to make risk-informed, data-based decisions. And the business, they know their businesses very well, but I want to make sure that they think about risk in everything that they do and the decisions that they make, whether to move into a new country, a new product offering, if we work with this vendor versus another vendor. And so that's one of the things that the board has also found an interest in. When the divisions are presenting their strategic plans, they also want to see, well, how are you thinking about risk when you think about your plan? And so it's been really good to see that partnership with the risk management team connecting with the business, and then being able to play that out to the board, and the board seems to find that very insightful.
Well, that's fantastic, Nancy. That actually, a lot of companies that we talk to, sometimes grapple with, they're good with resilience, they're good with technology, all of that stuff, but changing the culture and taking it really to the employees, the stakeholders, etc., is not easy. Let me flip the question. There's a couple of questions from the audience as well that I'll cover. But one, we are definitely seeing a significant kind of shift in the attitudes towards technology as well. But before that, one question that the audience has come up is, what are the must-have skills, for a CRO in 2020 and beyond? What's the two or three key, keywords, if you will, in terms of skill setting?
It's a great question. It's interesting that our HR team, our talent team, just recently asked me a very similar question as we're starting to think about people planning and different things. So I would say with my role, one of the things that I really heavily rely on is having the ability to think analytically. And really being able to connect the dots. I think, part of the benefit that I have from having audit under my responsibility, but having the various different second line groups as well, is we learn a lot across the organization, and being able to connect those dots and being able to share insights with the business that we have because we have a much broader view, kind of being in the risk organization. So being able to establish those relationships, share the insights, have that analytical view, but also being able to do root cause analysis. I think that's a key skill that we in risk organizations or risk functions should have, because when things occur, it's good to do an analysis of, well, why did that happen? Could that happen here? Do we have the right things in place to keep that from happening, going forward? So I think that's another one as well. And I would say the final thing, it's more of that soft skill, but the ability to have connections and make relationships across the organization. And I think that one of the things that has really benefited me a lot within S&P is that people come to me with information. I'm not having to push myself or my teams onto the businesses. If they have a question and they're concerned about something with a risk angle, they're reaching out to me. They're reaching out to one of my leaders, someone on my team, to pull into a conversation, to pull into a steering committee discussion. And so I would say being able to have those good connections and relationships that allow you to be able to engage in those really good risk-based conversations, I think, is also a key skill to have.
Very well said. And given we're almost running out of time, I'll ask you the last question. Not surprisingly, MetricStream GRC Summit. So technology itself is going through a lot of evolution, and all the three
Sure.
points you mentioned, being analytical, connecting the dots, and even relationships. Technology can aid a lot. We talked briefly earlier about your taxonomy, all of that stuff as well, right? How do you bring it together?
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think? First, S&P itself is a leader in data analytics. How do you see organizations adapting technology for GRC, for risk management or integrated risk management? Whether it's futuristic technology, like no more futuristic actually, like AI, ML, robotics, but also your platform-based approach. How do you think about that as a chief risk officer?
Sure, it's a great question, and we're in the middle of doing some pretty exciting things. We have the real privilege to have a great group of data scientists within S&P Global, and they're helping us to be able to take the data that we have all over the organization and to be able to leverage that data to be able to gain insights and provide that information back out to the divisions on a real-time basis. So we're in our early days of leveraging our data scientists, but I would encourage you, if you have that capability within your organization, leverage that skill set and the data that you have to bring it together to be able to provide those insights out. But some of the other things we're doing, we're building bots within some of our teams and really enabling us to analyze data, look for those nuances, look for those things that will stand out and cause us to say, we need to drill into that a little bit further. Because sometimes it's hard if you're looking for a needle in a haystack. So being able to leverage bots to be able to pull those pieces of information closer to you, and those data scientists to be able to grab those pieces of data that cause you to say, here's where we need to drill in and dig deeper. And some of the other things things that we're doing. Certainly from a GRC platform standpoint, it's important to make sure that you pull all of that information in one place if you can. I know, prior to us having a platform, we were using spreadsheets, we were using, PowerPoint decks. We had a lot of information distributed throughout S&P, and we found that we were, using really key talent just to try to pull all that together so that we could report out. And then by the time we got it ready to report out, it was old news. And so we found that, needing to have a platform, such as a GRC platform, and then being able to have digital information kind of at your fingertips to be able to pull that together and have real-time information to be able to provide back out to the divisions is really important. So we're looking at, pulling things from the cloud. We're doing more digital work with our audit team and more continuous auditing. And so a lot of different things that we've already started to do and have plans to expand that even further, going into next year for 2021.
So Nancy, thank you immensely. Like I said, this has been very, very insightful given your cross-organizational function, your experience, having worked for an audit firm, also having been an auditor, now with the Chief Risk Officer role. And I'm sure the audience has found it extremely insightful and also inspirational in a lot of context, given what you have done to help transform S&P's view of risk internally, but also externally as an organization. So I appreciate your joining. Thank you for coming to office, and doing this for us. And we will talk soon again. Thank you.
Well, it was my pleasure to be a part of your summit, and thank you, Gaurav. It's been great, and I hope that everybody did find this helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you.